For 2 years, Cora had pushed away the guilt of her last fight with her younger brother Jesse. His wandering spirit was a world away from her stable life, a gap that had become a canyon of silence. The silence shatters on a Tuesday morning when a local news segment flashes an image of a mud-caked backpack pulled from a ditch. A backpack she recognizes instantly from the Grateful Dead patch she'd sewn on for him as a peace offering years ago.
Do you know this man?
The reporter's voice fades as Cora realizes the last person to see her brother alive might have been the stranger who photographed him on that lonely Texas highway. It's stories like these that remind us how quickly a life can change course, and how the smallest detail can unravel the biggest mysteries. If you find yourself drawn into these journeys of discovery, consider sticking around to hear how this one unfolds. Cora's world was one of numbers and deadlines. As a junior accountant in a Denver firm, her days were a predictable rhythm of spreadsheets and client calls. It was a life she had built for herself, a fortress of stability against the chaos of the world. Jesse had been the opposite. He chased horizons, believing that true life was found not in a career path, but on the open road, with nothing but a pack on his back and a thumb in the air. Their last conversation had been a familiar, bitter argument over the phone. She'd pleaded with him to come home, to think about his future. He'd accused her of being scared, of locking herself in a cage and calling it a life. The call ended with angry, clipped words, and for the next 2 years, the silence between them grew, heavy with things unsaid. That Tuesday morning, the silence was shattered by the drone of a news report from a West Texas affiliate channel she'd left on by mistake. She was stirring sugar into her coffee when the image appeared on screen. A dirty, dark gray backpack, its fabric stained with mud, sat on a police evidence tarp. Dozens of patches covered its surface, but her eyes locked onto one, the iconic Grateful Dead skull, the Steal Your Face logo, surrounded by dancing bears. Her breath caught in her throat. She had sewn that patch on for him herself 5 years ago, a silly peace offering after a teenage squabble. It was a memory of a time before the distance between them felt so vast, a time they'd gone to a music festival with their dad, just before he got sick. The coffee cup trembled in her hand. The reporter was saying the backpack was found by a road crew cleaning out a culvert in Pecos County, Texas. It had been there for months. The sheriff's office was asking for the public's help in identifying its owner. Cora's mind flashed to the photo that had accompanied the online articles about the discovery. A grainy image of a young man with shaggy hair walking along a cracked highway, his thumb out. Jesse. It had to be him. Her carefully constructed world of numbers and order dissolved into a single, terrifying thought. The only thing left of her brother was a bag full of his belongings, pulled from a muddy ditch. She didn't hesitate. She called the number on the screen, her voice shaking as she gave her name and her brother's to the deputy who answered. He was polite but non-committal, taking her information and promising someone would be in touch. But Cora couldn't wait. She couldn't sit in her quiet apartment and stare at spreadsheets while her brother's last known possessions sat in an evidence locker 1,000 miles away. She called her boss, her voice steady now with a purpose she hadn't felt in years, and told him there was a family emergency. Within the hour, she was on her way to the airport, a one-way ticket to Midland, Texas, on her phone. She didn't know what she would find, but she knew she had to go. The silence had been broken, and she had to be the one to find the voice that had been lost. The town of Fort Stockton was a lonely outpost under a vast Texas sky, the air hot and dry. The Pecos County Sheriff's Office was a low brick building that seemed to sag under the weight of the sun. The man behind the desk, Sheriff Hewitt, was older, with a weary face and eyes that had seen too much. He listened to Cora's story with a patient, practiced air of skepticism. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a slow drawl, "we get a lot of folks passing through here. They get a ride, leave some gear behind, move on. Your brother probably found a reason to travel light." "Jesse wouldn't have left that backpack," Cora insisted, her voice firm. "Everything he owned was in there. And that Grateful Dead patch. I sewed it on for him. It's his." Hewitt sighed, a man resigned to a task he found pointless. He led her to a small room where the backpack and its contents were laid out on a metal table. The smell of dried mud and mildew filled the air. There were the worn-out jeans, a couple of T-shirts, and a dog-eared book of Walt Whitman poetry he'd carried since high school. And there, at the bottom, was a cheap disposable camera. "Can I have this developed?" she asked, holding it up. Sheriff Hewitt shrugged. "It's evidence, but I suppose it can't hurt. There's a 1-hour photo at the pharmacy down the street." Hope, fragile and thin, flickered within her. She took the camera and walked out into the blinding sunlight. An hour later, she sat in her rental car, flipping through the small stack of glossy photos. Most were what she expected: vast, empty landscapes, a blurry sunset, a close-up of a desert flower. But then she got to the last few shots. 3 were taken from inside a moving vehicle, looking out at the passing landscape. Then there was a selfie of Jesse, his familiar, crooked grin filling the frame. The last picture made her heart jump. It was a clear shot of a man in the driver's seat, looking back at the camera and smiling. He had a thick, graying beard and wore a baseball cap with a swirling tornado logo and the words, "Tornado Alley Trackers." This was it. This was the stranger from the highway. Back in her motel room, Cora opened her laptop. A quick search for the logo brought her to a blog run by a man named Dale Petty. It was a collection of storm-chasing photos and stories, documenting his travels across the plains. There he was, in his profile picture, the man from the camera. His blog had a contact page. With trembling fingers, Cora wrote out an email, attaching the photo she'd had scanned at the pharmacy. She explained who she was, who Jesse was, and what had been found. She hit send and stared at the screen, praying for a reply. She didn't have to wait long. Less than 20 minutes later, her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Dale. "Oh, my God," the message began. "I remember that kid. He was a good kid. I'm in Arizona right now, but I can be back in West Texas by tomorrow afternoon. We need to talk. Here's my number." The next day, she met Dale at a small diner off the interstate. He was just as he looked in the photo, with kind, worried eyes. He remembered Jesse clearly. "Called himself Jay," Dale said, stirring his iced tea. Said his real name felt too formal for the road. He was a smart kid, quoted poetry to me. Said he was looking for a place to get away from it all, live off the land, you know? A real idealist. Cora nodded, the description painfully accurate. "Do you remember where you dropped him off?" Dale's expression grew serious. "I do, and I've been feeling sick about it ever since I got your email." He'd heard about this place, a community, he called it. Said they were self-sufficient, living in harmony with nature. The turnoff was just a dirt track off the main highway. No signs or anything. Place was called Eden's Gate. He scribbled a rough map on a napkin. He was so excited about it. I almost told him it sounded too good to be true, but he had such a hopeful look in his eye. I just wished him luck and drove off. Dale looked at her, his face full of regret. "I'm so sorry. I should have been more suspicious." "It's not your fault," Cora said, though a cold knot was tightening in her stomach. "You were just being kind." She now had a destination, a name: Eden's Gate. Following Dale's hand-drawn map, she drove for nearly an hour, the paved road giving way to a dusty, rutted dirt track that snaked through the desolate landscape. Finally, she saw it. A simple wooden archway with the words Eden's Gate carved into it. Beyond it lay a collection of small cabins, neatly tended gardens, and a few solar panels glinting in the sun. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic. A man emerged from the largest cabin as she pulled up. He was in his 40s, with a warm, welcoming smile and the kind of easy charisma that puts people at ease. His eyes, though, were a sharp, piercing blue that seemed to take in everything at once. "Welcome, traveler," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "I'm Elias. What brings you to our humble home?" "I'm looking for my brother," Cora said, her heart pounding. "Jesse. He would have been here about 8 months ago." Elias's smile didn't falter. "Ah, yes. Brother Zephyr, a beautiful soul. He was with us for a time." He gestured for her to walk with him through the gardens. "He stayed for about 2 months. A hard worker, but his spirit was restless. This life of discipline, it wasn't for him. One morning he was just gone, packed his things before sunrise, and walked back out to the highway. We assumed he'd found a new road to follow. The story was perfectly plausible. It was exactly the kind of thing Jesse would do. Yet, as Cora looked at Elias, at his serene smile and watchful eyes, she couldn't shake a deep, gut-level feeling of wrongness. Something here was a performance, and she was determined to see what lay behind the curtain. "I've come a long way," Cora said, forcing a weary smile. "I know this is a lot to ask, but could I possibly see the cabin where he stayed, just to feel close to him for a moment?" Elias's gaze lingered on her for a beat too long before his warm smile returned. "Of course," he said. "We have a guest cabin you can use for the night. Rest. In the morning, I'll show you where Brother Zephyr lived among us." His hospitality felt like a trap, but it was one she had to walk into. That evening, as a communal dinner of vegetables and rice was shared in the main hall, Cora listened to Elias speak about community, harmony, and shedding the poisons of the outside world. His followers listened with rapt attention, their faces serene. It was mesmerizing, and it was terrifying. Later, alone in the small, clean guest cabin, she waited. When the last lights in the compound had gone out, and the only sound was the wind, she slipped out. The cabin Elias had pointed out as Jesse's was at the far edge of the property, near a dense thicket of mesquite trees. The door was unlocked. Inside it was sparse: a simple cot, a small table, empty shelves. It smelled of bleach, too clean, scrubbed of any personality. She ran her hands along the walls, the floor, searching for anything Jesse might have left. A loose stone, a carving in the wood. Nothing. Defeated, she was about to leave when her foot caught on the edge of a small woven rug beside the cot. As she straightened it, she felt it. A slight give. A looseness in the floorboard beneath. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Using her car key, she pried at the edge of the board. It lifted with a soft groan. There, In the dark space beneath was a small leather-bound journal, Jessie's journal. Back in the safety of her cabin, she turned on the small desk lamp and opened it. The first few pages were filled with Jessie's hopeful, sprawling handwriting, praising Eden's Gate and Elias's vision. He wrote about the satisfaction of working the earth, of feeling connected to something real. But as the weeks went on, the tone began to change. He wrote about the long hours, the meager food, Elias's strange, controlling punishments for minor infractions. Then came the entry that made her blood run cold. "It's not just vegetables they're growing out past the ridge," he wrote. "It's a massive marijuana operation, acres of it. This isn't a community. It's a farm, and we're the labor. Elias is a liar. Everything here is a lie." She frantically flipped to the last page. The writing was rushed, panicked. "Elias knows I found out. He cornered me today after I went over the ridge, said I was part of the family now for good, that no one ever leaves the family. His eyes, they weren't right. I have to get out of here. I'm leaving tonight, as soon as it's dark." A floorboard creaked outside her cabin. Cora froze, the journal clutched in her hand. The doorknob turned slowly. The door swung open, and Elias stood there, his face silhouetted against the night. The warm, welcoming smile was gone, replaced by an expression of cold disappointment. His eyes flicked down to the journal in her hands. "I had a feeling you were more perceptive than your brother," he said, his voice no longer smooth, but flat and hard. "He also kept his thoughts in a book. It's a foolish habit." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the tiny room. "I'm afraid you won't be leaving, sister. It seems you're part of the family now, too." Meanwhile, back in a motel room in Arizona, Dale Petty couldn't sleep. He'd called Cora twice since their meeting, just to check in, but his calls went straight to voicemail. He told himself she was probably just out of cell range, but the story she'd told him, the look in her eyes, it all came back to him. This wasn't right. That place, Eden's Gate, it had sounded too good to be true, and he'd let that kid walk right into it. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for the Pecos County Sheriff's Office. He didn't care if he sounded like a paranoid old man. He told the dispatcher everything, about meeting Cora, about the commune, and about his fear that she was in serious trouble. Sheriff Hewitt took the call. He remembered the determined young woman from Denver. On its own, Dale's call might not have been enough, but combined with the recent discovery of the backpack and Cora's visit, it painted a disturbing picture. A remote, off-grid commune was the perfect place for things to go wrong. Citing Dale's report of a potential large-scale drug operation, Hewitt knew he had enough to bypass local jurisdiction and call in the state police for a tactical team. The raid happened just after dawn. A convoy of state police vehicles thundered down the dirt track, shattering the morning peace of Eden's Gate. They found Cora locked in the guest cabin, shaken but unharmed. Elias and his inner circle surrendered without a fight, their serene facades crumbling in the face of overwhelming force. It was one of the younger members, a boy no older than Jesse, who finally broke under questioning. He confessed everything. Elias had confronted Jesse that night he'd tried to escape. There was an argument, a struggle, and Elias, in a fit of rage, had killed him. They buried Jesse's body in the woods, deep in the mesquite grove behind the marijuana fields, and dumped his backpack in a culvert miles away. The police found him right where the boy said he would be. Cora waited in Sheriff Hewitt's truck while they worked, staring out at the harsh, beautiful landscape that had swallowed her brother whole. A few weeks later, she brought Jesse home to Denver. The funeral was small. She stood before their family and friends and read a passage from the Walt Whitman book that had been in his backpack. It was a poem about the open road, about the endless journey of the soul. Her voice didn't break. For the first time in 2 years, the guilt was gone, replaced by a profound, aching sadness, but also by a sense of peace. She had found him. She had brought him home. The silence was finally filled, not with anger or regret, but with memory. In the months that followed, Cora established a small foundation in Jesse's name, a fund to provide financial aid to families searching for missing loved ones, helping them navigate the lonely roads she had been forced to travel herself. Cora judged her brother's lifestyle as reckless, while he saw hers as empty. Do you think it's possible to truly understand someone's choices when their values are so different from our own? Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. If you followed this story to the end, thank you for listening. Every share and subscription helps us to keep uncovering and telling these important stories. We'll see you in the next one.